So at Leigh Hilton PLC, we've helped over 6,000 families protect the assets that they leave to their loved ones from divorce, creditors, and lawsuits. We've also helped over 300 families implement the plans that we've designed, and over 1,200 families implement the plans that other attorneys have designed. And the reason why that's significant to you is for most of you, this estate planning is kind of depressing, so you're going to want to put together a plan, put it on the shelf, and forget about it. But what's important to you is that it actually protects you if something comes up, and it protects your family if something happens. And the fact that we've implemented plans on the back end after something's happened gives you the peace of mind that it's going to go smoothly for your family. One of the things that's unique about our law firm is we do both estate planning and elder law. So estate planning is the who gets your stuff when you die. Elder law is what we're going to be talking about today. It's Medicaid and veterans benefits. Our firm also belongs to a lot of professional organizations, and the advantage of that to you is for most people, when you hire an attorney, you get the experience of that one attorney, what that one attorney has learned over his or her career. But by us belonging to the larger organizations, you're actually getting the experience of what all the attorneys in the organization have learned over their career to make sure that this happens as smoothly as possible. And it's extremely important in the area of Medicaid and veterans benefits because both of them are federal programs that are administered on a state level, and each state has their own rules and regulations on how that they're taken care of. For example, with Medicaid, in most of the states of the United States, they require your home be sold before you can qualify for Medicaid. But we are very fortunate in Texas. We're one of the few states that you can keep your home. It's protected for Medicaid purposes, and we're going to talk about some things we need to do to make sure it's protected. But if that ever changes or starts changing, then we're going to be able to see that trend in other states and be able to predict that change here in Texas. We have a location in Bartonville, a location in Aubrey, and a location in Denton, and you can meet with us at any one of those locations. I've written 2 books that you might be interested in receiving. One is The Who Gets Your Stuff When You Die, mainly on estate planning. Talks a little bit about the topics that we're going to cover today. I've also got 2 other books that are both entitled You're Not Alone. One is Living with Alzheimer's Disease. The other is Living as an Alzheimer's Caregiver. So what is the biggest fear for many older adults? And when I ask this question at seminars, the most common answer I get to that is outliving your money. The concept of having your medical expenses exceed what you've saved. Now, they say most people in the last 6 months of their life spend more on medical care than they spend for their entire lifetime. And part of that has to do with we have technology to keep people alive in a lot of situations, but it's very, very expensive. So what if I told you about everything you've already been told about how to pay for nursing home care is wrong? So a lot of times people get told, oh, you have enough assets, you don't have to worry about ever needing Medicaid. What if that is wrong? Because the care cost is huge. To live in a nursing home for a year costs $96,000 a year. And for 24-hour in-home care, and most people, if you ask them if you could be cared for in the home, do you want to, it's $180,000 a year. Now, the average stay in the nursing home for somebody who has Alzheimer's is 8 years. So at that $96,000 a year number, that's almost $800,000 that would be spent on care. And if you think about it, nursing homes are the last stop. So most likely that person has been cared for in the home for a number of years, spending that $180,000 a year. So even if you've saved all your life and you have $1 million, you could still run out of money caring for your spouse if they ever get Alzheimer's. So life's unpredictable, and we hope nothing ever happens where we need this care. But there's accidents, strokes, Alzheimer's, dementia. There's lots of reasons why people end up needing care. So I'm going to talk to you about 2 categories of planning today. One I'm going to call pre-planning, and the other is called crisis planning. So pre-planning is a situation where you don't think you're going to need to go to a nursing home. You either are healthy and hope that it never happens to you, or you may have some sort of illness where it's possible you might need to go to the nursing home in the future, but you really don't think it's going to happen in the next few years. Crisis planning is for when you've already gone to the hospital or already gone to a memory care place, and you believe that going into a nursing home is going to happen in the next few years. And I'll go through both of those with you. So for pre-planning, one of the first questions is, can you insure around this risk? So there is long-term care insurance policies, but you have to be healthy enough to qualify. And age may not be a barrier. I actually have a client right now, they're both in their mid-70s. They both are in really good health, and they have about $250,000 in a retirement plan. There is a product that they can actually take that $250,000 in retirement money and put it into this insurance product, which then if either one of them ever need long-term care, it'll provide for in-home care, memory care, assisted living, or even nursing home care at $7,000 a month for their lifetime. And in the event they never need care, there's actually a payout or a benefit that goes to their children. So for them, because they're healthy enough, that's an option to look into. So if you're healthy enough, you at least need to talk to somebody about whether long-term care insurance makes sense. And it's actually one of the better options because it allows you the flexibility of being cared for in the home or going to a memory care place. Because Medicaid, which I'm going to talk to you about in a minute, it only covers the actual skilled nursing part of the nursing home. But most of the time, by the time people are willing to talk about long-term care insurance, the house is already on fire. So similar to you can't buy home insurance when the house is on fire, long-term care insurance when you have a current need or you have a diagnosis that shows that you're going to have a need, that isn't the time that you need to purchase the policy. Now, I personally have and like the blended policies, so the ones where if you need long-term care, there's money available for that. If you never need it, then there's a payout to your family on your death, so that way that the money that you put into the policy isn't wasted. So in the event you get a diagnosis where you think you might start needing care, it'd be a good idea to revise your wills to include what we call a supplemental needs trust. So what would happen if you were to pass away, the money can be in that trust to provide and take care of your spouse, but that money's not available for Medicaid, doesn't count against you for Medicaid or count against your spouse for Medicaid, and it's a way to put that protection in there. So for my clients that come in, that their spouse has some sort of diagnosis and they're a little worried that they might need care, that's one of the protections that we put into their plan. The other thing that I would recommend, and actually I recommend this whether you think you'll ever need long-term care or not, you need to have a financial power of attorney that has language in it that allows for planning. So a good portion of the planning techniques we use to protect your assets if you need to go on Medicaid or you need veterans benefits involve getting the money out of your name, gifting it away to somebody else or creating a trust. And if your power of attorney doesn't have the authority to do that, then they're not going to be able to get those assets out of your name to do that protection. So one of the things we do for our clients is we do a very broad financial power of attorney that includes the ability to plan for Medicaid and veterans benefits. We also do the shorter statutory one, so that if somebody wants the shorter one, you've got that also, but the longer one a lot of times is more beneficial when it's actually needed. Important thing to think through with both Medicaid and VA benefits is there is a look back, or they look to see if you've given away money at the time you try to apply. So for Medicaid, 5-year look back. For VA benefits, it's a 3-year look back. And that was actually enacted on October 18th of 2018. So anything given after that date, 3 years prior to applying for benefits, that money is vulnerable. So one of the things we look at is in the event you think you have money you want to protect for Medicaid, and you're willing to give up control of that money, because the only way to protect the money fully is to allow somebody else to be in charge, we're able to set it up where we take care of that. Now, one of the hard things and the things I talk through with my clients is it's hard for people to give up control. And so that's one of the reasons why they don't do it too far back. But the other thing to talk through is when you give money to somebody else, we're going to want to put some protections around it. So I had a client years ago. She wanted to give $500,000 to her son to protect it just in case she needed to go in the nursing home. And I said, well, I'd like to put a trust around it to remind him it's your money and for him to remember that it's to take care of you. And she said, oh, no, I trust my son. My son would do the right thing no matter what. I don't think I need to put any sort of protection on it. And I said, well, if he passes away, will his wife do the right thing? And he's like, oh yeah, they've been married 30 years. She's a great woman. There's no way she wouldn't do the right thing. And I said, well, okay, if they both pass away and it goes to the kids, will the grandkids do the right thing? Oh yeah, I've got 2 wonderful grandkids. They would do the right thing no matter what. I have no doubt I'm protected. So she gives the $500,000. She actually writes the check out to her son and daughter-in-law. And then her daughter-in-law meets the man of her dreams. And it happens to not be this lady's son. And so she goes to her husband and she says, I'm leaving you and I'm going to take the $250,000 your mom gave me and I'm going to go start my new life. And there was no way to stop her from taking that money and going off with it. So that's part of why I highly recommend, even if you've got the perfect family, we want to make sure that it's protected. So we create a trust to protect the amount that's gifted. It reminds them that it's yours. And you can also make sure it's protected if something goes wrong with your beneficiaries. So if they were to get sued or have creditor problems, the money you've given them to hold for you doesn't become vulnerable. Now, I told you at the beginning, in Texas, houses are protected when you go on Medicaid. But if you don't have an attorney help you get on Medicaid, you may not realize that the house is vulnerable when you pass away. So Medicaid, after you pass away, if it's been spending money on your care, Medicaid is going to send a letter to the family that actually starts with the word sorry for your loss. And the reason why they added that is because they actually got scolded for being callous and not saying sorry for your loss. So they say sorry for your loss first, and then when you get into the body of the actual letter, it says, by the way, you owe us $300,000, and when you sell the house, we're going to take the money out of the house. And so if you haven't done the right documents with an attorney to protect the house, Medicaid is going to get that money out of the sale of the house. But we can prepare a deed that says you keep your house for the rest of your life. On your death, it automatically goes to the people you want it to go to, and then Medicaid can't touch the house. But it's got to have certain language and certain wording for Medicaid to recognize that as a valid deed. Now, Medicaid won't let you give your house away during your lifetime, but it will allow you to have it transferred on your death. So for VA benefits, there used to not be a look back prior to October of last year, or year before last, but now there's a look back. It's a 3-year look back. And your house, you're allowed to have a house and 2 acres as exempt in order to qualify for VA benefits. And like I said, you can't have given it away within the last 3 years. So crisis planning. Crisis planning is when you've already fallen and broken a hip and you're in the hospital and then you need long-term care. Now, one of the things that confuses a lot of people is they think that Medicare will pay for nursing homes. And Medicare does pay for all of the first 20 days in the nursing home and up to the remaining 100 days. So a total of 100 days, first 20 in full. If you've got a good Medicare supplement and Medicare will pay for an entire 100 days in a nursing home. But after that, it is your assets that pay for it unless you've got long-term care insurance or you have Medicaid. So one of the questions I get asked quite a bit is Medicaid and VA planning only for the poor? So a lot of times when somebody asks an attorney how to protect assets for Medicaid, they'll say, oh, no, you have more than enough assets. There's no reason for us to protect those assets. But the very first lady that I helped get on Medicaid, her husband get on Medicaid, they had worked their entire life to accumulate $300,000. They were living in an independent living. She was paying $3,000 a month in rent, and her husband ended up having to go into skilled nursing. And she realized that if she paid that $100,000 a year bill for him to be in the nursing home, she would run out of money in 3 years. And under the rules at that time, without having an attorney, she was allowed to keep $100,000. And so one of her questions for me is, okay, if I can only keep $100,000 and I'm spending $36,000 a year for my care, in 3 years I'm broke. I'm still broke at the end of the period of time. How can we do some sort of protection? So we were able to do a protection where we actually took the $300,000 they had accumulated together so that she had money to live on. I had another client, because I've told you people with Alzheimer's average stay in a nursing home's 8 years. Her and her husband had actually accumulated $1 million. and her husband had Alzheimer's, ended up needing to go into skilled nursing. He had something called sundowner syndrome. And what that meant was as it gets closer to sundown time, they start acting erratic. And she was really concerned that he was going to have a nightmare, jump out of the bed, try to run from something, and break a hip. And so she wanted somebody to sit by his bed to make sure that he was safe. He's already in skilled nursing, so they're already paying $8,000 a month for his care. Plus, she was actually paying somebody to sit by his bedside all night to make sure that he didn't fall and break something. Because in the nursing home, it is one caregiver to 40 people. And if you need more care than that, you've got to pay extra to do that. So at $100,000 a year for his care, plus about another $100,000 for the person sitting beside the bed, which meant she was spending $200,000 a year on his care, she was going to run out of money in about 5 years. We were able to get him on Medicaid. So Medicaid paid for the $8,000 a month. She was still paying for the private caregiver. But then that way there was money to take care of her for the rest of her life and to have money available for that extra caregiver. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about public benefits for long-term care. I'm going to talk to you about veterans benefits, and specifically I'm going to talk to you about something called an improved pension and an improved death pension. Medicaid, I'm going to talk to you about it for elderly and people with disabilities. So specifically when you need skilled nursing level of care. And the reason why I'm making that distinction is there's a lot of other veterans benefits out there, and there's also a lot of other Medicaid benefits out there. All right, I'm going to walk you through the VA improved pension. And it confuses a lot of people because there's a pension you can receive as a veteran based on years of service. And so a lot of people will think they don't qualify for this because they didn't serve in the military long enough. But the improved pension I'm going to talk to you about today, you just have to have served in the military 90 days, 1 day during a defined period of war. And there's 2 levels of benefits. The highest level is what they call aid and attendance. And that means you need aid and attendance, meaning help from somebody else, to perform the activities of daily living. The next level down is called housebound. So with housebound, it means you don't leave the house without somebody else helping you. It doesn't mean you can't leave the house. It pretty much means that you don't drive or go places on your own. Now, occasionally I'll have a family where their loved one shouldn't be driving anymore. It's not really safe to be driving. And one of the ways they'll get them to stop driving is that it helps them qualify for this benefit. So both of these benefits have 3 levels. For the aid and attendance, if you're married, it's about $2,000 a month. If you're single, it's about $1,900 a month. And if you're a widow of a veteran, it's around $1,200 a month. For housebound, if you're married, it's about $1,700 a month. Single, $1,400 a month. And a widow, it's around $900 a month. And so this isn't anywhere near enough money to take care of you full time, but it can help with the expense of care. And a lot of times, Medicaid doesn't cover anything other than skilled nursing. So it doesn't cover assisted living, it doesn't cover memory care, and it also doesn't cover care in the home. But the veterans benefit can actually be used for all 3 of those. You can also pay a family member to take care of you. So if you have a family member that's already taking care of you, you can pay them under this benefit. And so a lot of times it's an added bonus. It also protects the people taking care of you from getting caregiver fatigue. So if they can pay somebody a few hours a week to come in and help with this benefit, it makes a huge difference in the care. Now, one of the statistics, the scary statistics with Alzheimer's is the caregivers 60% of the time die before the person with Alzheimer's. And I've actually watched this happen in 2 families that were clients of mine. Both of these ladies were taking care of their husbands, became so exhausted from taking care of their husbands, and also weren't taking care of themselves medically. Both of them ended up getting pneumonia and passing away. So one of the reasons why I help people get this pension is to help them take breaks and to help them get the care that their spouse needs in order to make sure that the spouse caring for the person actually has some breaks also. So the eligibility qualifications for the VA benefit are a service requirement. You have to have done 90 days of active duty, 1 day during a defined period of war, and there's a way to actually go on the internet and find the defined periods of war. We actually need either a certified copy of your DD-214 or the original of your DD-214. And most people that have served in the military have that discharge paper. It's usually in a safe deposit box, file cabinet. Now, some of the people, when they were discharged, they were told to file it in the local county records. And so we've actually found it by looking in the county they were discharged into or where they lived shortly after service. So if you served in the military, even if you think you're never going to need aid and attendance or never need care, it's worth locating that discharge paper and making sure your family knows where it is. If you can't find it for your family, then there's a way you can request it from the VA, and it can take up to a year for it to be found, and you can't get the benefit until it's located. So it's worth tracking that down and making sure your family knows where to look for it. Second requirement is medical necessity. I told you a minute ago there's 2 levels of medical need. Housebound, meaning you don't leave the house without the help of somebody else. Aid and attendance, meaning you need more help than that, and specifically with activities of daily living. There's a net worth requirement. You can't have more than $128,640. But it's not just assets, it's assets plus 1 year's worth of income less your medical expenses. So it's an interesting calculation in how that gets put together. They enacted in 2018 an actual look back or a penalty for giving things away. So if you have more than that amount of money and more than 2 acres in land, or more than 2 acres in land, we can actually have you give away a portion of your assets as long as you do it 3 years before trying to qualify for VA benefits. That money would be protected. You're also allowed to have a pre-need funeral plan, personal belongings, a car, and life insurance without cash value. Cash value and life insurance does count against you for this. And the income maximums are actually the same numbers as the benefits. So pretty much what they look at is at the point where your annual income minus medical expenses goes below the numbers that we have for the benefits, that's when you start qualifying for the benefits. And for a lot of families, if they can go under by just even $1, then we can actually do extra care with the extra money that's involved. So for Medicaid, you also have to have a medical need for care. So you can't go on Medicaid just because you're homeless. You've got to have a medical need for 24-hour nursing care. Now, Medicaid, we can actually apply for it either when you go into a skilled nursing facility or when you start having somebody at home care for you. But a doctor has to certify that you need 24-hour medical care. It pays for the nursing home care and it pays for some community care. And what they do with the community care is they really look at how much would it cost Medicaid to pay a nursing home to take care of you, and then that's the amount of money your loved ones have to use for your care. You don't have to be poor, because many of the assets are exempt, and there's generous protections for the income and assets for the community spouse, meaning the one that's not in the nursing home. If you work with a law office like ours, we can actually, for the spouse that's not in the nursing home, most of the time we can protect most of your assets. If you're a single person trying to go on Medicaid, we can usually protect about half of the assets. But it's definitely worth talking to an attorney to see what can be protected. Even if you don't have much in assets, it's still worth having an attorney help you walk through the process, because Medicaid nowadays is similar to how HMOs used to be, which is they initially deny the claim and you have to appeal to get benefits. Medicaid a lot of times makes you have to go through a lot of hoops in order to finally qualify for Medicaid. And too many people assume that they will qualify, meaning they don't have much, or that they won't qualify. So one example is somebody assuming that they would qualify. It was a lady who had a tract of land and a mobile home, and she sold it to a really good friend, and that really good friend was paying her $300 a month to pay for the mobile home and the land. She went into the nursing home, and the way she saw things and the way the nursing home saw things is she had income of $300 a month. And so the nursing home did her a favor, applied for Medicaid for her, didn't charge her anything to apply. And then about 90 days later, she got a denial letter saying she had too much money. Now, because she was single, she wasn't allowed to have more than $2,000. And what Medicaid looked at is she had a promissory note, meaning somebody had agreed to pay her $300 a month. And at that point, she had about 10 years left that they were going to pay her $300 a month. So they saw it as though she had $36,000. And even if you discounted the note sum for the time value of money, she still had more than $2,000 a month, $2,000 in a potential future income stream. So at that 90-day mark, they denied her for Medicaid. Now her daughter, prior to her applying for Medicaid, had actually paid for her care for 2 years. So her daughter said, okay, I'll just take over the note, and that'll be you paying me back for the money I've spent on your care, and then you can go on Medicaid. And Medicaid said, no, wait a minute, you can still sell the note, and your daughter did you a favor of giving you 2 years of paying for care, and so you're still disqualified until that money runs out. And so the daughter did end up having to pay for several more months before her mother qualified for Medicaid. But the main point of the story is there may be assets that to all of us seem logical that it wouldn't count against you. Because the daughter was actually able to prove she'd already spent $180,000 on her mother's care. Surely she was owed this $30,000 note. Or it's just she's getting $300 a month, that ought to go towards care and the rest of it shouldn't. Wasn't how Medicaid saw things. So for Medicaid benefits, there's some income requirements. And what will happen is if you have over this amount of income, Medicaid won't let you qualify for Medicaid. But in the event you have more than the $23.49 a month that you're allowed to have as the maximum income, we can set up something called a qualified income trust. So what happens with this is we actually take all of the income you have, it comes into the trust. You get to keep $60 personally as your personal allowance. The rest of the money goes to the nursing home, and then you can qualify for Medicaid. But in the event you don't have this trust set up and you even have $1 more than that $23.49, you don't qualify for Medicaid. Now that's for a single person. For a married person, the community spouse, the spouse that's not on Medicaid, is allowed to keep the greater of 100% of their income or $32.16 a month in income. And it can come out of either the spouse in the nursing home's income or the community spouse, the one that's not in the nursing home. And a lot of times we can actually use this to protect assets because we can actually allow the assets to create income in order to take that. So the maximum amount for the applicant, the $23.49, is whether you're single or married. You're not allowed to have more than that, but we have a way we can work around it. The spouse that's not in the nursing home, they're able to keep 100% of what they make or the $32.16 per month. So a few protected resources. For a single Medicaid applicant, it's $2,000 in liquid assets, 1 home, 1 car, personal belongings. You can have a prepaid burial, but it's got to be non-refundable. For a married applicant, they've got something kind of unusual. They take your assets and they don't care whether it's separate property of your spouse. So the spouse not in the nursing home, even if they brought $1 million into the marriage, that's still considered assets that are to be divided. You take everything you have, divide it in half. They let you keep a minimum of $25,728 and a maximum of $128,640. So if you had $150,000 is what you and your spouse have in all your assets, and we divide that in half and it's $75,000, you get to keep the $75,000. But there's lots of strategies we can use to protect more assets, and so that's why it's worth working with an attorney to make sure we protect as much as possible. So for some of you who've done no planning, haven't thought through this at all, you might be wondering what the next steps are. And for some of you who have already done planning, in light of what we've gone over today, you might be wondering if you should be doing more. So what we recommend is you schedule a time to meet with somebody in our office where we can walk through both the requirements for Medicaid and VA benefits and come up with the best protection possible for your family. You can call our office or you can go to our website and we'll give you more information regarding that. We would love to meet with you and your family.